righty. Well, let's welcome everybody back. So I'd like to welcome back all the attendees who were certainly with us last week. And so glad that you can join us again for this evening's seminar. We do know it's summer and it's a nice bright sky here this week. So outside is calling for sure. So you'll recall that throughout our webinars last year, though, we did focus on bringing clarity as to why you do what you do, adapting to COVID lockdowns, considerations for your business transition, and we continue to build on your business and financial management education. That's a huge part of how I love to spend my day. So today we're focusing on moving your business into the future, as I have through my recent restructuring, in order to bring an ever-increasing level of service in response to the growing needs of my clients. And in particular, my small business clients like yourselves, who really benefit from having a family chief financial officer on their team to benefit from the expertise of bringing my business knowledge, transition, and wealth management experience to your table. Through my search for the very best team members to fill the various specialist requirements for my clients, I am so happy to have found Angela Armstrong. Angela is the founder of Prime Capital Group of Companies. As a business finance expert and business owner herself, she brings a wealth of knowledge to understanding the issues, but most importantly, to solving the problems created by cash flow crunch and the true loss of opportunity. In getting to know Angela, I have found her to be a true thought leader for today's business community. Now, last week, she shared with us true business solutions to help your practices recognize and adapt to the impacts of the accelerated flight to digital and shock to loyalty that are critical in creating VAM experiences. Those experiences that patients truly find valuable, accessible, and memorable. So, Angela, how are we addressing VAM from an internal position?
I think that VAM, which is a phrase that Roxanne and I coined when we were contemplating this session and the content and the information that would be reasonably delivered and meaningful to you. When the game is changing rapidly in the marketplace, VAM is important. VAM stands for being valuable, accessible, and memorable. If we don't create brand, if we don't create client stickiness, and if we lose out on capturing what we call the hearts and imaginations of our clients, which we'll see today, it's critical to continue to bring in that next generation of clients. It's critical to attract that energetic talent that you need on your team. And it's critical to bring on strategic partners that are going to help in a referral source. And then who's going to be exiting you from your practice down the road? And what do you need to build up in your momentum over your client partner and ownership journey in order to have that successful exit? So what we're going to talk about today is that at the end of the day, curating your capital effectively so that you can invest in VAM is one of the strategies available to you. As asset financing specialists, Prime Capital helps our clients kind of bring to life the vision for the future of their business and to focus on both their productivity, i.e. keeping up with the changes around us, and the profitability, ensuring that you can optimize every client experience to bring the best value and streamlining your operations to preserve and create superior value, not just for your clients, your employees, your partners, but ultimately for you as a practice owner, because otherwise, why are you running a business if you're not trying to create that value? I want to just take a second here, Roxanne. Last week's session is available by video. Do you want to describe how people can get access to that?
Yeah, so the video will go out. I will have those sent out in a follow-up newsletter to anyone who registered. Having said that, if you can't wait for the newsletter to come out, certainly feel free to reach out to myself and I'll pass that on to you in the meantime. But it will come out in a post event newsletter that will send out. But I am away from the office next week, so do look for that second week of August.
Awesome. And we're recording this session just so that you're all aware. The contents of this are really focused on Roxanne's client base. So anything that we talk about here has really been geared to be focused on the kind of practices you run, the industry, market, and business intelligence. But what we've also tried to do is look at the bigger market space and kind of distill some of that intelligence to you in this context. Hopefully we keep it within an hour. We went a little bit longer last week because we had a lot of good content. Also, at the end of the session, if you've got questions, we'll maybe take time for some questions. If you want to have conversations offline, we'll give you a chance to do that. And we have some other things we're offering as well. So we'll start here with a bit of a summary of last week's session, just because it sets some of the context for what we're going to talking about today. So last week, we talked about the external market. And the reality is there's nothing about the external market that you can control. You can't decide whether a big company is going to come and consolidate the market. You can't control whether an online competitor is going to come and take your dispensary and put a lot of competitive and margin pressures on it. All you can do is be self-aware, know what those external pressures are, and ensure that you're focused on creating value that is not going to be susceptible to those external pressures. So we talked about these things. Rather than going through them, definitely you can take a screenshot if you want. You want to increase your margins by becoming more valuable. What's value? Value is how you're differentiating your business through the patient lens, not your lens, because what matters is the patients that are coming to see you. And for example, we give great service. That's table stakes. You're not going to get away with that as differentiation because everybody says they do it. So differentiate is really finding a value proposition that people cannot easily replicate. Understanding the patient problems is key to picking the right differentiation, picking a problem, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Technology moves fast, and it's what your clients expect, especially after what we've gone through in the last year. We spent a lot of time last week talking about COVID and the impact on consumer behavior. It has made a drastic and permanent shift in that consumer behavior and consumer expectations of how quickly, how agilely, how frictionless that experience of making buying decisions is. One of the statistics we learned last week is that 43% of online buyers are making their buying decisions in bed at night, in the comfort of their own homes. But if that becomes their benchmark for this is a great, what we call the Amazon effect, Amazonifying that client experience. I'm going to get it tomorrow, and I'm going to get it with a click of my mouse and three button presses. How can you tap into that and Amazonify components of your business? And that can be a differentiation for you. It at least is the new table stakes. Better than service is you got to be available in technology. Then there's easy ways to integrate technology, and you don't have to go and integrate artificial intelligence. Look at the drivers that are driving revenue and profitability in your business, and what are the gaps in those? Where are you losing momentum? What adds value? So I really recommend you go when that video comes out, have a watch of that. It's an hour of your time, but it'll be a valuable hour, and it will help you connect the dots and some of the things we're talking about today. And then finally, differentiation is picking a square on the map that you can. The word is dominate, but for you that you can serve. What is the square on the map that you can build your whole business branding and identity and conversation and marketing components, the communication strategy that you use, how you serve those clients? Pick a square and dominate that square. Being everything to everybody, that commoditized generic version that we had 20 years ago is not going to cut it in the new world. There's too many competitors. So now we want to talk about what I think is the most important imperative when you talk about internal pressures. And Roxanne and I had a lot of conversations about this. And I think we settled on the two of the biggest problems that people have are, who am I selling to? Who am I hiring in order to fulfill that client service and patient service reality? And then who am I potentially enticing into my practice, attracting into my practice that will allow me to exit? And this is all about people. Let's face it, most of what running a business is about people, but the internal the realities we're going to focus on is all around the demographics. What will be different for you depending on the framework that you are living in right now? And we won't have a chance to find out where everybody is sitting, but you're either in a startup phase, you've just bought a practice, or you're about to buy a practice, or you're working for somebody else and you want to own a practice, or you're in the prime of your business. Oh, sorry, we got to go back a couple slides, Roxanne. Or you may be in the transitioning stage of your owning your practice where you want to start to plan that exit, but that could take up to 10 years. So the more you can focus on these internal pressures and how you respond to those to make your practice run the best it can possibly be is important. Okay, now we can move forward. Sorry.
Sorry, I ended up, that's my clicking problem again.
That's okay. That's okay. So I don't want to distill the whole world down into millennials and boomers. But the reason I want to focus them, and I want to say, I already revealed to you my age. I'm a proud Gen Xer. So my personal reality kind of falls somewhere between the boomers. I'm married to a boomer, and I have kids that are in that millennial stage. So I'm kind of sandwiched between those, both personally and in my business world. A lot of my clients are boomers. Those are the ones that I've had as clients for 20 years. But a lot of my incoming clients, and certainly most of my employees now, are millennials. So, in that demographic piece, it is really important that I understand. Now, they all have, I'm not saying every person in a generational spectrum is the same. Obviously, we have personality profiles. There's a spectrum within a generation, just like there is a spectrum across all generations. But there are some fundamentals between these generations that influence what they want, where they're sitting right now, how and why they make decisions, how and why they use technology, what their plans are in the next 5 or 10 years, the nature and characteristic of the services they want, how they want to get information from you, how they want to buy from you. And if you don't already have those defined as part of your overall differentiation strategy, you're going to have a hard time recruiting. You're having a hard time keeping clients because you won't be relevant to them. Again, I'm going to not chastise people for having a generic practice, but say that might not be the best way to make your mark, your stamp in the world going forward. Our business stamp is core entrepreneurs. Yes, do I have some mom and pop homepreneurs that are my clients? 100%. Do I have some multinationals and some municipalities that are my clients? Yes, but I do no marketing to those markets. 100% of my market focus, 100% of my training, my intentionality in my business is focused on what I've defined as my core entrepreneurial market. And then I've broken that down. Well, entrepreneurs can look like, well, the boomers that are entrepreneurs are at a different stage in age and reality of their business. They're more in the transitioning stage of business than my younger millennial entrepreneurial clients. And I can tell you, if I don't give a millennial client an application they can do online, they're not going to interact with me. The boomers will never fill one out. They want me to email them a PDF form. So I have to understand my clients so I can deliver value. So this is really, and then you've got the Zoomers, right? The Gen Z, which is behind the millennials. Who are they? They're actually more similar to some of the older generations than to the millennials. The way Gen X, my generation, is closer to that silent generation that preceded the boomers. So the first consideration in this conversation, the why I'm including this slide, is because while there is no generational truth that affects every individual, you have to choose your market with a little bit of a broad brush in your spectrum. Say, if my market is going to be families, well, those are probably young families, right? Maybe they're going to grow and I'll age out and I'm going to have an aging clientele. Maybe that's where, if you were a boomer and you had a practice, maybe you look at a lot of your clientele and they're elderly and they have a whole different service need. So that relates to everything about how you deliver solutions to them. But if you've decided you're gonna be located in a geography where there's a lot of young families in starter homes, and your business caters to the boomer cohort, you might have some problems to look at in your business. So that's why we're really focusing on understanding the market. I know you've heard this before, but it's extremely relevant. Okay, so we'll move forward. If you're wondering what these are, they're potatoes. I had a girlfriend went to Peru a number of years ago, and she came back with all of these pictures of potatoes. I've never been to Peru myself. Maybe some of you had, but I was fascinated. I said, I would never have guessed that a lot of these were potatoes. She said, there's something like 4,000 varieties of potato in Peru. Not only that, they cultivate them very carefully because every single potato variety has a different nutritional content. You could actually have an incredibly healthy, well rounded diet and eat nothing but potatoes. Sadly, that's not true about the North American potato market, where I think at an outside glance, there's maybe 200 varieties of potatoes. And I probably confident that in your grocery stores, like in mine, there's maybe five. One of them is the little potatoes from the Little Potato Company, which is a client of ours as they've grown. But, they have a particular type of potato that they grow. And then you've got baker potatoes, and then you've got the kind you use for mashing. There's not a lot in between. You're never going to see a choice like this. The reason I talk about that is our people workforce is doing the opposite of what our potato cohort in North America is doing. We've gone in potatoes from 4,000 varietals available on the planet to 200 that are really marketed in any kind, and maybe it's less than 10 that you can get at your grocery store. But our workforce is diversifying at breakneck speed. As a matter of fact, if we go to that millennial cohort, I gave a presentation last year to the North American National Vehicle Leasing Association because they were talking about they have diversity challenges in their market. If you're in the car industry or you know anybody in the car industry, they have some diversity challenges which they're trying to solve. But when you are in a particular cohort, like if you occupy a particular spectrum, whether that's um, a cultural spectrum or an age spectrum or a proclivity, for technology spectrum, whatever that thing is about you, you probably don't see things outside of your silo. Humans have blinders on. So what I want to do today is kind of talk about some of those blinders you may have and how those could be creating problems in your business. The millennials, just before we get too far into this slide, the millennials, by the way, are the most diverse workforce generation that has ever been on the planet. Diversity in their workforce, like being able to have a lot of people, a lot of ideas around them, by 2025, that's 4 years from now, 75% of the global workforce is going to be millennials, and millennials expect and live diversity. So if you're looking at your business and saying, why can't I attract that really bright upcoming practitioner into my practice, look around at your practice. Does it look diverse to that incoming millennial? Because if it doesn't, they're not going to give you a second look. It's not a checkbox for them. Contrast that with the boomer generation, where by 2030 in Canada, we're going to be seeing massive numbers of retirements. I think something like 250,000 people per year. That's 1/120th of our Canadian workforce exiting the production economy. And they're moving into a really different consumption phase. So I want to talk about what is the impact of these retiring Canadians on our economy. So basically, you've got a few things here, starting at the bottom, and these are in no impressionable or order of importance. They're all important. Workforce scarcity. The federal government is scared to death of these impending retirements of first the boomers and then the Gen X not that far behind them in the next, technically my husband is already 60. We're not that far away from thinking about our kids are all on moved out or mostly moved out. And what's going to happen when I'm starting to think about selling my business? But the federal government is looking at workforce components and saying, all of a sudden, we have a massive amount of people that do work here. And the Gen X generation behind the boomers is the smallest generation. Millennials are a little bit bigger, but we have incredible workforce scarcity. That's going to put a lot of pressure on wages. How are you going to hire people? You're going to have to either offer something super compelling to them or pay them more because you're going to be dealing with a scarce workforce. Consumption reduction means when people retire, they still consume, but they consume a lot less. Somebody that's retired doesn't have kids at home. They're not buying for a family of 4 or 6 or 8 anymore. They're not probably spending on the same kinds of things. Maybe they're going out for dinner, but the rest of the time they're eating very sensible dinners at home. They go to the 5 o'clock meal where they're getting a discount. The consumption in the economy changes.
And they don't like to change their glasses as often. They don't look at wanting 10 pair to go with their different work outfits.
That's a beautiful thing, because last time I went to a glasses place, my friend bought 4 pair because He's a VIP, and he likes to have different glasses to go with his different phases of life. My dad owns one pair of glasses, so I that's something I didn't know about glassware, but that makes a lot of sense to me. We
Yeah.
can move forward on this slide. So impact of immigration. We have an immigration population which is about offsetting the value of the retirement. So about 250,000 immigrants per year will offset some of that, but it's going to take them a while to get into the economy. And are they coming? Some places of the world are sending immigrants to us, and they're wealthy. They have money to spend. They're going to come as consumers. A lot of them, though, do not. They become producers and workers in the economy. So maybe that's something you need to think about. If you're going to offset workforce scarcity, where are you starting to look for your talent? But they may not be replacing that consumption metric. So we need to think about that. Increase in healthcare needs. So if you've got an aging population, that could be a silo of differentiation you consider, but it's hard to do that if you're geographically located in a young startup home community where you're probably going to see young families and maybe children, something, unless you really focus on that. But the overall healthcare needs in the economy increase, which means the federal government actually has less money to spend on other things. That might be more outsourcing, more trying to build channels into the economy where private service providers can provide that, because they're simply not going to be able to undertake the budget. Remember, the rest of the population is smaller. We've got a smaller tax base paying for a vastly increased older population that have increasing healthcare needs and increasing healthcare expectations as well. They want to be taken care of in the best possible fashion. That's a lot of pressure on the economy. The last one is, I just alluded to it, is the shift in the tax base. So you've got a smaller cohort of people, those millennials, the Zoomers coming into the workforce in the next, 5 to 10 years. They're all of a sudden going to be absorbing. What is their tolerance going to be for, half or 60% of my paycheck goes to support our aging population, because that's how it's always worked. We always had big populations supporting smaller generations above us. This is all of a sudden going to be shifting around. So those have big impacts for our businesses, for our recruitment, and possibly for our exits in the businesses. Just things that you should be thinking about in the context of building your business. So I put this picture in because we just talked about immigration. And I want to say that once you've had a 10,000 foot look at the market, you want to drill down into the specific, which is your unique business. It's doing one thing for one patient in one way that's going to satisfy them and turn them into a repeat patient. As far as differentiation goes, and let's talk about just immigration and culture influence, understanding the changing nature of the geography that you're in, the neighborhood that you're in, who those proximate to it are, will impact not only potentially your future clientele, but who's available in the market to come in as a recruit. And now we've got work from home. People are not going to be willing to drive long distances to find a job. They're going to want to find jobs that are much closer to home. And future buyers also might be wanting to have a practice that's in a demographically very siloed space. So they say, I want to tap into this unique, differentiated market, and I'm going to build my whole practice around it. So the more you know about what is potentially differentiated already by what is inherent in your business, what's inherent in the location that you're in, the better you can look at this one stamp on the map and make that your stamp. In this case, it's building a beautiful pot of tea in a very methodical, time-valued way. But this person knows exactly what they're doing, and there's steps to doing that, and the whole package is all very harmonized. That's what you want your business to look like. Recruiters often tell me that staff in either bucket, where they just want a job, any job. So that's one bucket of a potential future hire. They just want a paycheck. They don't really care about your business. There's not going to be necessarily loyal. They might be looking for a job now that they're gonna change. The other bucket is the employees that are looking for a fit. They're looking for, what do I see myself in your practice? If I looked at this picture, is that a place I want to be? Is that a place I can feel enthusiastic about going to and serving clients in every day? Do I identify myself in that space? And you got to think about, am I looking for a hire that I know I'm going to have a revolving door, but I don't care because it's cheap and easy and I don't need to train them too much and I don't need to be too reliant on them. I'm just going to use technology to do stuff. Or I want a high touch, high service where it's extremely customized. These are questions you need to be asking. And these are the internal things that your business needs to be knowledgeable about. Here's an example from my own life. I had a client who had a franchise for pet supplies. He decided he was going to put a franchise for pet food supplies. By the way, in his prior life, he had owned a business records business, which he sold, and he was kind of semi retired. And he called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, I want to open a franchise. Can I do some financing with you?" And I said, "Well, why a pet food franchise and why in that location? That looks like a terrible location to me." And retail is all about location. So he had coffee with, and he brought me all this research. He said, "Okay, look at, I know I've been watching the permits for the city. Pet food's a high margin business. I know I want to be in pet food. So the next piece was for me to figure out where I wanted to locate this franchise. And I found this location because there are permits for 5 separate 20-story condo towers going in. As a matter of fact, this was about 4 or 5 years ago. All those towers are built, and he sold his business. He picked the right location. He knew exactly who his market was. He also knew that not far from the 20-story condo towers where the retired people were moving into after they sold their houses, and they had their little house pets that they were bringing in there, they wanted something that was going to be walking distance from their condo to pick up treats or food or whatever. There's also there's a college not far where lots of young people live in residence, and he could have easy access to employees for that. So he really thought about all of these features in his business. He didn't just walk in anywhere and said, "Yeah, I'm going to open up a pet food store." He was extremely intentional building that market in. So his exit was extremely intentional and extremely successful. This is kind of a funny slide. I love this little robot. If we just contrast, if we go back to these two generations we're kind of focusing on, millennials and boomers, we often hear that there's friction between these two groups, but they actually share something very significant in common: work ethic. They both work very hard. Some of that is for the boomers, that was just how they grew up. For the millennials, they've actually had to work very hard because they came to their stage of life in a very competitive market. There are differences too. And one of the differences you can see on the screen, over 50% of boomers, based on an average of, say, 28 years of employment history, they've never experienced a single layoff. They might have changed jobs, but they've got this amazing average job tenure, 12 years. If you could have an employee stay with you for 12 years, think about what value they're driving your business. They know your clients, they know the brand practice, you could trust them to deliver services seamlessly. You get somebody that's in 3 years, it takes you a year and a half to train them, then you get a little bit of value and you're starting all over again. So you could just imagine this thing with job tenure is very fraught with emotions for a lot of employers. But I want to share something with you about this millennial statistic. And millennials have often been castigated for this. Oh, you have no loyalty, you don't stay. Well, one of the problems that the millennials have had is getting jobs where they could actually accelerate and advance in. There's some studies that I was reading about this issue itself, and it said that one of the challenges for millennials has been that corporate growth slowed so substantially over the last 20 years. In fact, from the mid 1980s to the mid 2000s, the average number of managers' direct reports doubled. So if you think about that as corporate growth was slowing, in other words, companies were getting bigger, but how they managed their teams was changing. And if I'm a manager and I have really optimally, you shouldn't be having more than between 6 to 8 direct reports, depending on the kind of work you're doing, how intense it is. You can't do a good job with much bigger staff than that. But if you're a millennial and you're one of those 6 to 8, and what you see is your boss is getting, now they used to have 6 to 8, now they have 16 direct reports. What does that tell you? Now I've got a 1 in 16 chance of accelerating into that manager role instead of a 1 in 8 chance. But what I see is the corporation is just loading more and more onto that manager. A, I don't want that job anymore. But B, I'm waiting too long for that opportunity. So one of the things they've had to do is job jump in order to get that, as that's what's happening in corporate, I would say corporate North America, because it's true in Canada as it is in the US. Also compounded by the fact that The boomers, well, let's talk about 2008, particularly in the States with the mortgage crisis, the liquidity crisis, that ransacked a lot of people's retirement plans. I would say in Alberta, for example, 2015 oil crisis and the impacts over the last few years have done the same thing to a lot of people that were hopeful about retiring. So if you all of a sudden extend your retirement, what does that mean for the people below you? So millennials get a bit of a bad rap, but they are extremely hardworking and they bring a lot to the table. And if you were to create opportunities for people with strong technical skills in a post-COVID work world where people want flexible work solutions, they can deliver work for you if they don't necessarily need to be in your practice. What can they do for you from home? Give them freedom, think out of the box, and allow them to grow and expand their skills. That allows those millennials to come in and be powerhouses in your business because you're bringing opportunity to them. In the stage of the business life cycle where you're in the transitioning stage, in that boomer stage, or maybe you're working in a practice or you've got your eye on a practice where somebody may be looking to exit, the issues are quite different. There may be sandwiched between, I've got an aging population in my practice because I was really good at retaining patients, but the problem is eventually those patients are going away, right? We have to understand that if you've got an elderly cohort of patients and you don't have a natural conflict and you haven't focused on that elderly patient market space and specialized in how you're delivering services to them, those elderly patients are going to go away, not be accessible to you. How are you bringing new people into the market? So a stale practice is actually a big challenge that you need to start thinking about. The other reality is what the buyers, employees, and patients care about. In the baby boomer, even for a Gen Xer like myself, service and personal connection are still probably the top drivers. I tend to want to do business with people that I know, like, and respect. Um, but that's because I have to trust them and I need to build a relationship with them. Loyalty means something, it's very individual and personal. In the presentation we did last week, we explored this COVID phenomenon that the consulting firm McKinsey calls that shock to loyalty. And I think Roxanne referenced it, where the consumer behaviors have been pressed rapidly into technology tolerance. Loyalty as a choice, then has been replaced by purposefulness because if I can get whatever I want online from the comfort of my bed, how much loyalty is involved in that decision? I might just want to scroll and see what other choices are that also have great online solutions. And maybe I'll find out that loyalty isn't as valuable for me as it was in the past. I'm not saying your boomer and Gen X clients are going to all of a sudden upend what they're doing, but their kids might be saying, why are you still going to that dentist? You don't really like them. There's lots of choices out there. Maybe there's somebody that we should try that's new and different. Um, we talk about the millennials and the Gen Z. This find purpose is their core hunting value. They want to feel purposeful, even if it turns out it's a bit of marketing prose that is making them feel like the business is purposeful. Marketing prose does its job. Things like why we use technology between the millennials and the boomers are going to be significantly different in what we're seeking to do with that technology. And understanding those differences aren't only going to impact how your patients feel when they're working with you, but they definitely impact the type of employees you're going to be able to hire. If you have millennial and Zoomer hiring desires that you really want to bring those people into practice because you want those clients patients that you have to reference the staff that you have and feel relatable to them, they're not going to come in unless you're finding ways to be relatable to them, and finding purpose and being very savvy with technology are two very important things. So we'll go to the next slide. So we can drill down. The blue attributes are things that are true about millennials. And I've said that they're the same. We're all people. And each spectrum has got people. I'm probably much more technology friendly than some people in my Gen X cohort are. Like in any generation, there's that spectrum. But these are things that are mostly true about the generation. And the green are the boomers. So if you look at the thing like at the bottom of the screen where it says 19% are influenced by social media, your boomers are not getting their information from social media. They may be on Instagram, but I can tell you they're not clicking on your ad, and they might not really believe what you put up there. They want authority figures, they want to trust, but they want facts from trusted sources, and they're going to go a ways to find that source. Social media, though, in that millennial generation, if that's your target audience, 47, almost 1 in 2 is influenced by what they see on social media. They're going to buy, they're going to be inspired by, they're going to connect with the purpose or the branding message that you give. So if that's your target market and you're not on social media, you're losing a huge opportunity. If boomers are your target market, I would not invest any time in social media. I would invest my time in making connections and building relationships with those people, because that's what influences their buying decisions. You can see some other things. The difference between a millennial, the phone is their avatar and it's their conduit to the world. And I want to see what's happening in the entire industry. And if you send me a digital newsletter, I'm going to open it on my phone 75% of the time. I'm not ever opening them on a computer, by the way. I'm going to open it on my phone because I always have my phone beside my computer. They're an extension of one another. But the phone is my avatar. It's how I brand myself in the world. And I want to know what you can tell me that's relevant in the big world. Tell me information. Share with me trends. I get behind that. If I'm a boomer, I want an app that's really simple and I want to use it to search things in your space. I want to say, how do I get to a product? I want to say, how do I book an appointment? How do I cancel appointment? It's a much more functional relationship. I am not reliant on that phone for information delivery, but I want to be able to search your site or through your app or through your website. I want to be able to search to get to the information I need. So I want to be able to ask you questions. I have a really great optician that I use. Their product selection is awesome. When you can get in to see them, it's fine. But last year I was really frustrated because I was trying to make an appointment after hours. They had very limited appointment scheduling because of COVID. In fact, they still don't let you come into the clinic, without a fixed appointment. And I sent them a note through their website. Nobody ever responded to me. That's really frustrating. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm also happy, very happy to use a mobile app. But my first place to go was, I'm going to book this online and I want to ask you a question and have you respond to me. And it was really frustrating. And I mentioned that to them when I went in there a couple of weeks ago. And they have what looks like a very avant-garde practice, but they have nobody whose responsibility is to look after clients like me. And I can tell you, I know I'm their buyer because they have a cohort of like this VIP thing where they bring you out and they show you all these expensive frames, and because they know you're going to buy 4 or 5 like my friend did, and he's going to spend thousands of dollars on frames and be treated like a VIP. But for gosh sakes, answer my message when I send you something on the website. Whereas the millennials won't care. They're just going to ping you. And you know what? They'll just unselect you. They're really not loyal to you. If you don't respond to them, they're going to go. I pressed the issue with my optician, said, listen, you made me mad because you didn't respond to me. And they apologized, but I didn't not go back to them. You know what I mean? So loyalty counts. I know them. I know what they're all about. But for that millennial buyer, and especially that Zoomer, you got to be aware of these things. They're all people, but they're influenced in different ways. This was a very long slide, and I'm just going to click through some of these things because I think we've tracked most of this stuff, Roxanne. So we'll go to the next thing. I thought this was kind of a fun thing. If you're thinking about that demographic reality for hiring, and you're trying to say, well, first of all, you have to decide who is your target market going to be. Then you have to decide, who am I going to hire? Not only what are their personal attributes, what's the skills matrix that I need, what is the personality fit that I need, but who am I hiring? And then what do I need? What kind of a workplace do I need to create? How do I interact with my staff? And I'll share something with you in a bit that's kind of some ads from different practices I saw for sale. And I thought it was interesting because I thought I could pretty much identify the nature of that practice by how they place their ad. Here you can see the difference between a boomer. What's a workplace turnoff for a boomer? give me some freedom to act. I want to have some empowerment. I want to have some authority. But by Jove, if you hire a bunch of people that don't pull their weight and I'm ending up pulling all the weight, I'm not going to be very happy at your workplace. So I want people that are going to be mutually accountable to whatever we've agreed to do. I want to be able to win and I want to be acknowledged for winning and I want to have a reward for winning. That competitiveness is very endemic in that generation. It's how they were raised, right? Go and get it, go and drive for the prize. Gen X, I would say, very similar. Greed is good. I mean, I grew up in the Gordon Gekko brick cell phone era. But they want to have relationships as well. They want to know you care about them. How's the cat? How is your mother? You know, these conversations that we have. And they don't want you to beat around the bush. Like, be direct. Tell me what you need. Give me a chance to interact with you. But that's what, if you're going to hire a boomer, if you have boomers in your workplace, other than the spectrum of people that in there, those are going to be some things you want to consider. Millennials, I know this this is a place that employers always struggle with. Don't talk down to your people. They want to be valued even if they haven't yet proven themselves valuable. It's very hard to do, especially if you're from, I'm from that work ethic. I'm closer to boomer in terms of my work ethic than I am to millennial for sure. And I want people to show value before I call them valuable. But millennials want to be treated in a different way. Remember, they spent all of their school years doing group projects, giving participation awards. They want to be treated like a team member and somebody that's doing valuable, and then they will get on board. They want you to be transparent. Tell me what's going on. Do not feed me like a mushroom in the dark. And you know what you feed mushrooms in the dark. It's not good. They want to have transparency in the business practice. Tell me what the problems are. I'm going to get on board and help you solve them. But if I feel like you're not sharing with me, I'm not going to stay. So that goes to the next one, idea sharing. Also, they get bored. Give them challenges, give them opportunities to share ideas, an idea board, project board, get them on board with some of those kinds of things. They're going to add value to the business and they're going to participate, but they're also going to feel like they're contributing. That's important. They also want feedback, but not like the boomers that want the super direct feedback. They want feedback, but remember, in language that doesn't diminish their value. So you have to say, here's the accountability, here's what we agreed to. Here's where I feel like we have a disconnect, and here's an outcome that didn't quite work out, and I want to talk to you about that. And it's a very collaborative conversation. Zoomers are actually much closer to boomers, interestingly. They want to have the relationship. They don't like having a lack of personal connection. Now they do a lot of those personal connections through technology, absolutely. But they still want to know who you are. They want to get on board with you, have that connection. I know these are our future hires, but you better get familiar with them because they're coming. They don't like not being trusted. Hey, I'm young, but I can walk circles around you with your technology. As a matter of fact, turn loose your website on me and I'll tell you what the problems are. Trust them. They grew up in this. This is their second language. Let me multitask. My daughter is a millennial, but I can tell you how many stories, so many stories over the years in school where she would come home and be studying and listening to music. And I was like, how can you do that? It used to really bother me. But then I looked around my staff and I noticed my controller does that. She listens to music while she's working on her books. She does a phenomenal job, but I can't do that. I don't multitask. I want to focus on, but for me to impose my strategies on different generations where they've acquired different skill sets, multitasking, remember, they were put into groups all the time to do their work. They're used to working in a little bit of chaos, a little bit of environment where there's lots of things going on. Let them be really great at that. You can pile a lot of stuff on them, just hold them accountable with feedback. Workaholism, they're not into the workaholics. They want to leave at 5. They want to have a life. They want work-life balance. So probably what that issue is, make sure you understand the accountabilities. What do you expect from them? What does success look like? They'll get that done because they're motivated to get finished at 5. And if there's no opportunity to work in a team and collaborate, whether it's with you or some of their colleagues, like projects get involved, that teamwork's really important to them. So not having that is going to be a workplace turnoff. It's not exhaustive by any stretch, but it certainly gives you a vibe of who your customers are. What space are you stamping that's going to be your differentiation in your practice? Now, how do you bring the people in and recognize not just your hires, but maybe even partners that you work with And how are your patients going to be affected by who's in the workplace and what they're delivering? Just a quick summary, how differentiation helps you hire. You can build a focused skills matrix. If you know what your market is, you know who you have to hire because you know the skills that you need to deliver the services in the right way to your target customer. So you first have to have that clear identity, know yourself. If you haven't done a bit of a brand expression, what is my brand about? What is it that we do? What's our stamp? What do we do that nobody else is doing? Generic is not differentiation. It's the opposite of differentiation. So know yourself. And that could be your market silo, could be that target client. And that generates information for you, your communication strategy, and everything else that you do. It makes it easy for your staff to represent your brand because if you hire in that differentiation space, it's a natural fit for them. They don't have to pretend to be, there's nothing worse. I've had staff, I've made bad hires over the years where I had somebody in the wrong job. And I really couldn't shift the job because I didn't have the job they would have been good at. I didn't have a good enough skills matrix defined for the role I needed them to fulfill in our business. And they tried like heck to pretzel themselves into the role. They never really had success. I never really had happiness. And it was a disconnect. And often those people either self-select out or you have to go through the painful unwinding of the relationship. And you know, as an employer, that's a very expensive process to go through. And it's fraught with risk. So don't get there. Make sure you've got a good fit and differentiation strategy coming up. It makes your training simple because if you hire people that are like-minded, um, then you're going to have an easier job to train them in the job because they already have the natural attributes to be success. Remember, your team builds the culture and your work culture builds the brand. That's what your patients are going to experience when they come in, when they interact with you online, when they understand, how do I fit? Am I a very important patient to you? Or am I just one of the people on the end of the spectrum? And I don't see anything relatable about your practice that makes me want to stay. So it extends to your marketing. I think about if I'm a mom, one of the ophthalmologists I used to visit here in Edmonton when my kids were young, they had one little PlayStation, but most of the store was me running around after the kids going, don't touch that, don't touch that, please don't touch that, don't put your fingerprints on the glass. Like I just felt this is not a family friendly location. And yet they branded themselves as a family practice. That's a big disconnect for me. I'm a mom. I don't want it to be stressful to come to see you. I want it to be you to have thought about what my problems are as your patient. And if you're truly family oriented, make me feel like it from the minute I walk in. Give the kids a little something to keep them busy when I walk in. That is going to go so far to make me feel welcome as a parent and not stressed out about trying to make my kids not touch all the things. It's like going into your great aunt's house and there's glassware and she never bothered to pick any of it up and she just expects your kids not to break anything. That is stressful. I can tell you, I go to that great aunt as infrequently as possible because I don't need the extra stress. Every one of your client silos or your patient silos that you identify, your brand differentiation should have exactly the same consideration. It's got to be through the patient lens. So what about transition? What about if you're not in that growth stage? What if you're thinking about the other end? And if your retirement is somewhere between 5 and 10 years in your future, like mine is, hopefully, um, you got to think about that now. Because to build a good brand and think about identify the problems, the things that you probably haven't thought about because you were just going along with your practice, you need 5 to 10 years to transform your brand and your practice into what you think that next buyer is going to want. A business broker actually says you actually should be thinking about it from the minute you start your practice. You got to think about how am I going to be relevant over the years and check in every year to say, are we still relevant? Are we still hitting the market? Are there any indicators that show that the market we chose is not really the market we're looking at? And maybe we need to refresh. Have you ever noticed that restaurants rebrand themselves? They might not change their name. They certainly change all the fixtures. They change their menu. They give a fresh look and feel to the restaurant. There's absolutely a reason for that because they know after so many years, the business gets stale. Start thinking about it now. It is never too soon, but a nominal amount of time is 5 to 10 years. If you've invested time in differentiating, finding your core market and it works really well, and you're checking in regularly to make sure you're continuing to attract those people, you're probably in a good space. Then when you go to sell, you know exactly what your messaging is. What practice are you selling to a future buyer? How can you make that so that just like when I walk into the ophthalmologist that hands my kids a little fidget toy that costs them 20 cents, but that's going to keep my kids engaged for whatever long I have to suffer as a parent through this. Maybe I just had to bring my kids with me to my own appointment. You've taken something off my plate. What can you take off your future buyer's plate in terms of them starting to identify with your practice before they actually get into space to buy it? I love this picture. As a realtor would say, this is a house with beautiful potential. The primary rule in real estate is location, location, location. And interestingly, I don't think I put this in my notes, but I had a friend talk to me about culture and hiring, and he said the most important attribute for a business is culture, culture, culture. In fact, one of the things we do in our hiring practice is we do a cultural interview with our team. The people that are going to be working with the employee, the prospective hire, have a one-on-one interview with them, and they bring culture questions. Then, and we've practiced those. We've written them down. They decide how they're going to deliver them. My strategy for this, and I don't attend that interview, is because I want my staff to decide whether this is going to be successful or failure. If they tell me this is a good culture fit, I know they're going to be engaged in making successful. If they teach me it's a bad culture fit, and remember, there's a few of them in that appointment, I got to take that away and say they're seeing something I might not have seen. Maybe I was focused on skills or whatever. Culture is what makes the brand work. So, literally in the past, location, location, location was true for your business practice as well. If you've got a practice, like we've talked about that demographic of startup families, and I'm going to have a family practice, and I've got fidget spinners for the kids when they come in, I got coloring books, on eyeglass frames. So maybe I'll get them thinking about eyewear. I'm going to teach a little educational piece I can hand out to them that I printed for $1, but tell you it makes my parents happy. No matter how premium your location is, when you picked it, geographies change. In every city, there's what we call transitional neighborhoods. They're transitional because they used to be something and they're no longer that anymore. If your practice represents what that neighborhood used to be and you haven't had a look, you haven't gone outside and looked around and went, oh, now it's all cannabis stores and liquor stores and I don't know, swap stores, and the residential area is just not robust anymore. That's not my source of clients anymore and patients. What am I going to do about that? Maybe I need to rethink my brand presentation in my practice. If you're unaware of whether your practice is in location that's up and coming or slowly declining, talk to a realtor. Go and interview them. They know everything about your region because they got to sell houses in that area. If your assumptions haven't been tested for a while, check back in. This home is no doubt going to find the perfect buyer. The old home is going to find a buyer that doesn't mind putting the sweat equity in to fix it up. They're looking at and they're rubbing their hands together going, let me add it. But there's financial math to that decision that could be a gamble. And not all buyers want to take on a retrofit. By contrast, this home is move-in ready. As a matter of fact, it's got the most current triple pane windows, digital controls throughout the home, new everything, touchless everything, and a low maintenance xeriscape garden. It's going to appeal to a much different kind of buyer. But which one do you think is more valuable? Well, you're right if you're thinking it depends. It's more valuable to buy the knockdown or that retrofit house if it's in a premium location overlooking a ravine and it's got 3 acres of land. This location might not have those attributes, but for the buyer that doesn't care about the land and they just care about move-in ready, turnkey, I don't have to lift a finger because I hate painting, I don't own a hammer, I just want to walk into something that's low maintenance. Which of these practices does your practice look like? That's who your buyers are going to be attracted by. So now the thing is how differentiation and understanding what your stamp is internally is going to help you sell. Just like you can build a skills matrix of who you hire that's going to help your patients and feel very much at home and deliver what you need them to deliver, you have to have a focused buyer index. And that starts with understanding, do I have a fixer upper? Do I have a turnkey contemporary home? And that, again, go back to having a clear identity. Know yourself first. The value proposition makes it really easy to understand for the buyer why they'd be interested in investing in your practice. Not just because I graduated and I'm kind of buying myself a job. That could be it, and maybe you get lucky. But buying yourself a job might not give you the best exit value for your practice. And I know that's something Roxanne is trying to help her clients work on, is making sure you build value in that practice. What makes your property better than others that might happen to be for sale at the same time? Or how are you going to target to a specific buyer who's going to fall in love and give you the best possible offer on your practice? It's going to make training simple again, because you know what your patients and clients need and want. You know, you can just express that to the buyer as well. This is what we look like. This is the value proposition. This is the return on the investment you're going to get. Again, I can define to you what my team is like, what my culture is like, what my brand is like. I'm sure a new practice owner, if you can walk into a really high functioning team that has an embedded culture, that makes getting that transition piece much, much faster. Exit options. So there's a few different exit options. One that you probably highly acutely aware of is aggregation in the market. It's an exit strategy that might actually feel like a bad thing to you because it's consolidating the market. You've got big brands that are buying independents, but that's an opportunity for you. If you've got an independent practice that's in a highly desirable neighborhood, um, you should approach an aggregator and say, hey, I'm for sale and I want to sell in 2 years. So that gives us lots of time to talk about this. That's an idea. Aggregating stores, if you are um, getting into that aggregation idea, or maybe you're on the other side of aggregation and you want to aggregate a few practices in desirable and differentiated markets so you could have 4 or 5 practices under your own banner, you want to think about things that are advantages of aggregation. One of those is cost management. So having multiple locations with one head office services team, procurement, ordering, distribution of product, accounting and financial services, HR services, all those things you don't have to replicate. And you have to do all those things or hire them into your practice if you're a standalone practitioner. Aggregation is a way to cut your costs, and it helps you beat that margin squeeze, which is one of the things we talked about last week. You can also make your brand more attractive and increase the multiple, because if you've got an aggregation strategy, maybe it's 2 practices, maybe it's 3 practices with differentiated marketplaces, or maybe it's 3 with common marketplaces. They're all family oriented practices. And you've just built this beautiful model that you can just rubber stamp another location. You know it's like buying a franchise. I know exactly what kind of real estate I need to go in. I know what success looks like. I have a client in Edmonton who it's a second generation pasta business. And they know that this is weird, but when they look to open up a new location, they always like to be close next to a daycare, if they can possibly do that in a strip mall or in a shopping center, because they have had such success with parents coming in after the end of daycare and saying, hey, let's get some takeout pasta for dinner. It's become a core part of their market. So they know that's one of their success strategies. It makes it easier to identify how to be successful. Another thing I want to offer as exit opportunity is foreign buyers. There's some programs through the federal government that allow foreign buyers to buy business practices. It's a way for them to get into the country, to get a good financial head start. If you could get familiar with where those buyers are looking, set up your practice marketing or branding to appeal to them, and get familiar with what are the resources and requirements for those buyers to come in. That could be a great way to strategically target a motivated buyer. It might give you more value than somebody that's just in your neighbor that might be waiting for you to retire and sell. What is compelling to the buyer of that knockdown or retrofit or genteel declining neighborhood might be your real estate. Maybe you own the property. There's lots of things you need to think about. So this was something I was doing some research, and I said, I'm going to go look at ads for practices that are for sale right now. And I thought it was interesting because I want you to tell me if you can say, so this was the ad. I just copied and pasted the ads and I took out anything that would kind of identify the location or the practice. This first one is own a newly built main floor optometry office in this town. It's got a newly built main floor. So what that tells you is I want it to be easy. I want walk-in patients. I want people to walk by my awesome front store windows and be attracted, compelled to come in and see what I say. Riverfront turnkey retail space in one of the most trendy upscale neighborhoods. Rare opportunity to own your own unit. So there's maybe a condoized development. So now I'm thinking, I want to buy real estate. That's an investment in my future. Maybe I could sell the practice, but keep the real estate later on and rent to a practice tenant. But I'm getting a vibe of this is appealing to a very specific buyer. Brand new flooring. So they're telling me this is, by the way, the fancy turnkey xeriscaped property. Move in. You don't have to own a hammer. It's all done. And there's this little perk of the real estate. And if you want the equipment in the inventory, we don't really caring about that. We want this is an experiential buy. This is for an experiential buyer that has a vision of themselves in this practice. Let's go to the next one. So this is much more scaled down kind of ad. Ownership, lead optometrist, opportunity, reasonable price. So it's like, this is kind of your middle of the road. I'm looking for an so here's the word that stood out for me. I don't know if it stands out for you. Custodianship of patient files. What that tells me is this practice has been in for a while. They want to be able to hand it off to somebody who's not going to change the basic fracture because they're going to tell their patients everything will be the same. You're going to, so if that's what you want that, home that is not brand new, it's not sexy, but it doesn't need a major retrofit and it's going to have immediate maybe traction with those patients. Maybe this is what you want to do. Eager OD. So this is somebody they're saying, okay, and then you keep reading 6 doctor days per week. Holy crap. So who's going to buy this? Maybe a Gen Xer. I work 6 days a week, lots of weeks, 5 days a week in my business, 1 day a week, sometimes on my business, doing special projects or thinking about my business. That's a buyer that either needs to split the work, like they got to hire a couple of people to share the workload. Maybe this is a practice that could be bought by 2 family oriented practitioners that would say, we're each going to do 3 doctor days each per week. And that's how we're going to share responsibility. And I'm okay making less money because I actually want family time. So the information they're giving you in this ad tells you a little bit about the opportunity and maybe attracting a certain kind of buyer. But here's something else they're telling you. Patient booking, check-in, third-party processing is done by a trained receptionist. This is not somebody that's highly invested in technology. So you got to know that going in, that the people in this practice are extremely important to the success of the practice. We'll go to the third one. Sorry, Roxanne. Solo optometry. This is a busy solo practice, 1-person show. Is that your gig? I don't know, but this is what you're getting into. They're giving you this important information. Main floor. So again, walk in medical laboratory office building. So you know you're with like-minded people. It's a clinical kind of operation. The owner wants to retire and they want the right buyer to come in and take over the practice. Multi-generational practice with a loyal patient base. What that's telling you is boomer, right? These are patients and families he's had for a long time or she has had for a long time. And you have to be prepared that you're going to satisfy. Maybe they're not the kind of patients that you would onboard if you were starting from scratch. Nevertheless, that's who you have. What are the opportunities and risks of doing that? Constant supply of walk-in patients because so that's great. Now you have to find a way to get them in the door, but you understand what your marketplace is like. Loyal, long-term, well-trained staff wishing to stay. That tells you something about the staff. Loyal, long-term, that's not a 3-year millennial turning over. That may be what you want, but that may also be hindering you from making changes in that practice. If you want to invest in a lot of technology, how easy are they going to be to get on board? Or are they going to be kind of stuck in, oh, I've always done it this way. I don't really feel any compelling need to change. They do talk to you about some of the technology that they offer, some of the systems that they've got, and that they have a lab. Now all of a sudden you're saying that's a differentiating strategy. But if you don't want a lab, that's pretty important to know. And then they talk about how big their dispensary is. If you're watching the online market and going, huh, maybe I don't want to focus on dispensing. I want to focus on healthcare solutions and dry eye and other kinds of eye health issues rather than just the dispensary part of the business. But anyway, they're telling you. And then I said, I wonder if I could identify who the target buyers might be. If you can just click this slide once, Roxanne. So I figured that that first practice kind of appeals both on a hiring and a buying basis to Zoomers or millennials. Think about it, right? It's sexy, it's techy, it's trendy, all the things that they're going to be attracted to. And if it's in that area, that's certainly how you have to get used to thinking about your hiring. I think the next one could be millennials. It could be two people sharing a family kind of a practice where they said, I don't want to work 5 or 6 days a week, but I'd love to share a practice with somebody. And the third one, I think, obviously, based on what you've told me, the appeal is to boomers or somebody that can understand that's what I'm getting into. I just thought it was interesting. Look at the ads. So if you identify your own business practice and you say, who are my clients or who do I want to attract? Being thoughtful about these ads is going to make a big difference to your exit opportunity. It would be a really amazing exit exercise to go through on your practice that you have right now. How would you describe your practice in an ad? Might surprise you. Okay, so the next thing we talked about a little bit last week about the math. This was in a particular kind of dry eye solution, and we had number of test labs. I kind of scrubbed out some of the thing to get down to the numbers. So we've got this one vertical market deriving from investing in one kind of piece of equipment that's going to drive $150,000 of top line revenue in your practice. And that's assuming the revenue is split on the left side. We assume that 149 is split over 20 days, 20 operatory or practice days per month. Maybe your practice runs more, but we just use 20 days to kind of say, let's get to a number that's reasonable. That $149,000 translated into 20 working days over 12 months a year is revenue of $622 per day. Obviously, you're going to have days with more and days with less, but that's what it averages out. If you bought the equipment that allows you to do this, your investment on those same 20 business days, practice delivery days, is $67 a day. Investing in this technology gives you 10 times revenue. And this is what we talk about curating your capital. How do you invest in recruitment strategies? How do you invest in the kind of training and really intentional market and differentiation branding? How do you start to build that practice differentiation out for those future buyers? It's making sure that you've got what we call a relevance budget, and it comes from deriving these numbers. How do I invest in things that are going to help me drive the top line? From there, I can reserve some of that money to be intentional about spending on these things that we're talking about today. The technology, yeah, that training your talent builds your brand. Obviously, if you've got a sticky brand with a really good, well curated, well aligned team, they help you make your patients very happy. Sorry, this is a bad habit of mine. I think about business clients. I know in your world they're patients, so my apologies to that. To me, they're interchangeable, but to you, they're patients. So if you've got that great team that's delivering amazing services and your patients walk away with an exceptional experience every time, that builds your brand. They're going to build referrals opportunities for you. A sticky client base or patient base generates referrals and sustainable cash flow because you know they're going to come in for their next exam. You know they're going to buy their next set of supplies from you. And hopefully, even though my optometrist blew it when they didn't answer my web, they know that I'm the generation that cares about more about other things, and they accepted my criticism, and then they treated me really well when I got there. So there, what's your client base, your patient base? How are you serving them? And they know I'm going to be sustainable cash flow because I was so happy with the last glasses I got from them. I'm going to go back there again. I'm not going to want to buy online, but they know that that's their practice. A sustainable business base that's supported by really valuable talent, a really sticky brand, great sustainable patient list, and that you keep that going, you're checking in, that attracts a motivated future buyer because you've got something that's incredibly valuable to offer them. Remember, plain vanilla, while I love vanilla ice cream, I like French vanilla ice cream. It's not plain vanilla, it's French vanilla. It says something special about that brand if I'm going to be a vanilla ice cream eater. And it makes me feel more special. How do you transition from plain vanilla to the French vanilla? Given what we know about consumer behavior, especially in a digital framework, and that you've got this flight to digital going on, especially through the last year of COVID, but those behaviors, I encourage you to listen to last week's session if you didn't. The behaviors are changing and they're not going back. And they've changed faster in the last 5 to 10 years than they have at any time in recorded history where we've been investing, bringing technology in. Used to take 85 years for something to get to adopted. Now it takes 3 or 4 years. And with COVID, it's taking much, much less. Technology is not the only spur you want to consider, but it does add value to help you manage costs, become more profitable and productive, and sets you up in the eyes of your prospective employees as a place that has a future. The same is going to be true of your buyers. So what's important for you to focus on? Number one, what stage are you at that? Are you at that beginning stage? Are you in that business prime stage? Or are you at that transitional stage? Start with understanding that. And then what is your imperative? If you're at that startup stage, you're building your brand. If you're at that transitional stage, you need to make sure that you've got something that you can identify. What are the good bones of this house that looks like it's a fixer upper, but I'm telling you, you can't get this location. Here's the good bones of it. Then let me describe those to you in my ad. There's going to be something that's compelling. You just need to figure out if you can describe it. What is your unique identity? We've talked about that ad infinitum. Differentiation is everything. And it's not just in the marketing story, it's in everything else that you do that reinforces it. Like the story about the mom coming to the store. If I feel like it's a family practice from the moment I walk in the door, then I get to believe you when you tell me it's a family practice. If you've got one little piece of toy in the corner, I think that you're doing a bad job with your brand delivery. Given what you know about your market, and this is number three, am I a turnkey business that has got that sex appeal and it's going to attract a certain kind of buyer, or am I a good bones rebottle? And that kind of goes back a little bit to your stage and imperative, but it helps you understand what are the gaps to getting to the buyer that you want and the value proposition you're trying to create. What's my team makeup? Who's on my team now? Are they loyal, long-term employees that might not want to make change that fast, but they can deliver the old way forever and ever? Or am I trying to attract young people that my patients can relate to because that's who they are? Are they trained and competent, or are they hungry for new knowledge and skills? Look at the gaps between your ideal future state and where you are now. Once you've figured out where you are now, you better be thinking about where you want to get and do that gap analysis. What's missing? What's one thing that you can start to check off your list? Make a list and then start to sort it off into low-hanging fruit, things that you can delegate, and do involve your team in this conversation. They probably know more than you do because you're emotionally invested in your business, not just objectively invested in the business. Look at the cost of transformation. How are you going to conserve capital from your budget? Leasing is the way we recommend. It's one of the ways lots of people do, is saying, I need to drive revenue and profitability, but I can't afford to take all that cash out of my back pocket because I need to be able to invest some of it in all of these other things. The gap analysis, doing great training and recruiting, figuring out what I need to change in my practice to make it compelling to a future buyer. You can do that. In other words, you can have your cake and eat it too. That leads to capital investment and conservation. So we're getting to the end here, and I just want to quickly talk about some of the benefits of leasing because it's what I do for a living. So forgive me a little bit of what probably feels like an infomercial, but to me, when I talk to business owners and they say, I can't get to that place I need to be, I say, well, yes, you can. You may need to think about it a different way. Um, when you're using automation and technology, there's things that it helps you do in your business. And some of these we're going to show you. And this is a bit of a repeat from last week. It changes how your staff works. If you can outsource or bring online your appointment creation. Remember that one clinic or said, we have a receptionist that takes all the appointments. Well, maybe if they're in a building that caters predominantly to elderly people, that's perfect because they want to come in and have a relationship with you. Remember, they want to know that the front receptionist name is Tamara and they're going to josh with her and they want her to be really engaging. But if your staff wants to get good at delivering technology and high value, profitable services, and your patients are going to want to interact with you through a digital framework, you have to think about how you're going to change how your staff works and the tools that you can give them to do that. And that takes money. How about if you change the throughput of patients? I can see more patients in the same time because I'm using technology in a different way. How about reduce the make work tests? Roxanne, you were talking about it last week about your best and highest use as the practice owner or as a partner in a practice. If your time on the weekends is spent doing make work things, you've got to find a better way. That's not your highest and best use in a practice. Outsourcing is one way to do it, freeing up your valuable paid resources to do much more value creation kinds of work. Technology and automation can help you do that. Building a business that's more resilient and future proofed. The neighborhood demographics change. What are you doing about that to transition? What kind of new seating are you putting in your restaurant? How are you refreshing your menu? If you're not doing that, you get to the end of your practice life when you're ready to sell. Do you really have good bones that someone else wants to sell, or are you looking a bit like the old cow that doesn't make milk anymore? Practices with happier clients and more sustainable revenue are easier to sell, hands down. That goes for any kind of business. On the other side of the screen, we'd quickly talk about ways that leasing helps you with these. Get the equipment that you need, conserve your cash. You don't have to spend it all up front. You can get your hands on productive, valuable technology that makes you relevant, that helps you deliver more valuable services without breaking the bank, without spending your savings account, and without sacrificing some of these other things that you need to do. You can, again, uh, build a valuable practice while you're investing in the technology. That's really what we do. I can go forward, and these are just some of the kind of the benefits of leasing. It solves how can I afford to do all of these things because I'm overwhelmed. I've got so many things that need investment. It's 100% tax deductible, which conserves more cash in your pocket because you pay less in taxes. Keeps you current with technology. There's no complex business criteria. It doesn't handcuff your future business decision. The agreement is tied to the asset, the equipment, not your future business performance, the way some other kinds of financing are. And again, I love this phrase, let you have your cake and eat it too, because it's just simple.
Yeah, I think this is something that we don't give often enough credit to. And I know when I ran my business, the reality was we typically wanted to buy stuff. If we didn't save up the money to do it, we would go to a bank and we would take out a loan. But there are a lot of negatives and additional challenges to that, regardless of what phase in your business you're in. And when I look at that transitioning out aspect, you know what? If the lease is with the company, so you have your professional corporation, that's who has signed that lease. When you sell that business, those leases just keep going, right? If there isn't a changeover too, that also needs to happen, like it would with a bank loan, or we have to carve out to pay off that bank loan, and now we're also cutting into our profit on selling that business. So there's tax reasons, there's numerous cash flow reasons, but also it makes a big impact on transition.
You know what, Roxanne, that is such a great comment because if you bought a piece of equipment today for 50,000 or a suite of equipment, I know a lot of the equipment can be only $12,000 or $30,000, but say you wanted to invest in a suite of equipment to refresh maybe it's a fixer-upper practice you're buying, or you want to just refresh to offer solutions to a new marketplace, and you bought $100,000 worth of equipment today, but you bought it with your cash. When you go to sell that practice, the buyer is going to look at the value, and you're not going to get your 100,000 back. You've put that money in. Now it starts depreciating. That asset's depreciating. What you're going to get is a depreciated value from the buyer. With the lease, you haven't put any of your own cash into it up front. You've put what you need to do, which is a piece of equipment that's generating revenue. It's actually paying for itself as you operate your practice. And when you do that transition point, it's easy because you're not trying to recapture value you put into the business 2 or 3 years ago. You're going to say, just assume the lease. So that's a really great point. It's a great catch on that. So we have just a bit of a summary, and then I think we're kind of winding up here.
Yeah, again, it comes back to creating VAM, right? You want to make your practice valuable, accessible, and memorable.
So like we did a summary last week, I'm going to ask Roxanne to give this.
Always putting me on the spot, right?
I know, you're good at it though.
So the reality of the external market is not something that we can control, but it is imperative that you are not only aware of it, but that you strategically invest in understanding it. So some of the challenges your practices might be experiencing are driven by the realities of online buying, changing consumer behavior, and managing the impacts of the shift, which also include margin compression and market consolidation. So here were some of the takeaways from session 1. Internal pressures resolve around changing demographics. Value differentiate through employee and the buyer lens. Conducting an objective look at what your business promise is, could be, or should be, and what resources you have or need to get it there. Technology moves fast and is what your clients and patients expect. Gap analysis on internal realities of your demographics and differentiation and how they work on your margins and practice value. And you want to deploy your capital strategically. You want to be able to have money available to bring in staff, to train good staff, to prepare your business for transition. These are all critical factors, as well as ensuring your market success. So it really is time for you to stay in the game, translate your vision into reality. Again, I'd like to thank the Alberta Societies of Optometry and the Canadian Optometry Group for helping me market these webinars. And the QR code on the screen is if you have not signed up for Optometry, Canadian Optometry Group, it is an email site. And when you track it on a Gmail account on your phone, it's really easy to clean through topics that don't relate to you or that you aren't interested. So it really is a great group to stay in touch and find out, what the pulse is on optometry. If you are interested in speaking further with Angela and taking advantage of her 30-minute complimentary discovery session, please look for the link in the follow-up newsletter that I'll be sending out in the next week or so. But in the meantime, do feel free to reach out to me. Don't feel like you have to wait for that newsletter to come out. I'm happy to pass on that information. And always, if you'd like to speak with me further about any of your goals, your financial plans, investments, insurance, or any other topics, please don't hesitate to reach out. I do love speaking with you. There is always a legal disclosure slide because that's what we have to do. Great. Thanks so much, everybody. And yeah, spread the news. We are planning to share this information again in the fall is what we're thinking. We haven't picked dates, so we're all flexible.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night.
Good night.